there. We have got a fast story today, so let's get started. Now, with our previous lesson, we had ended it where Stephen had been killed. A lot of the people who had become angry with him for what he was saying about Jesus and all had gotten so angry they just dragged him out and threw rocks at him and killed him. Well, on that same day, general persecution broke out against the church, and it seems like um, the people who had stoned Stephen decided that, okay, that's not enough. We have to go out and attack all of the people who were following Jesus and following what Stephen had been teaching them. And that happened too. Now, what we find out from this is that, for one thing, um, it says in the book of Acts, this is chapter 8, that the church was scattered. And I always thought that, okay, they're getting pushed out, they're being attacked, so they take off. And as I was studying for this, I found out there could have been a little bit more to that, because a lot of those people had come to Jerusalem from other countries, and now that they were under attack, they were fulfilling what they were supposed to based on what Jesus had said, uh, as far as going into all the world. And so a lot of those are just heading back to where they had come from. And many of those in the area seem to be spreading out of Jerusalem into Judea, which is the country around Jerusalem, and into Samaria. So people are spreading out to try to get away from the persecution, and for good reason, because this Saul that we had heard about right at the end of the last lesson was going after the church. He was grabbing people, men and women, and putting them in prison. Now, you may remember that the Romans were in charge of everything then, and people could not be executed unless the Romans said it was okay. However, the Jewish leaders could imprison people for their own charges. And so that seems to be what was going on now. It doesn't look like they were actually killing people at this time, but of course, if you're throwing a man and his wife into prison, who's going to take care of the children? So this caused a big stir. Now, they didn't go after the apostles, and there's a lot of speculation as to why. It's possible that they were avoiding the apostles because they had had no luck, this meaning the people who were against them, they had had no luck in stopping Christianity by going after the apostles. So it looks like they are switching to a different tactic where they're actually going after the people who are following the teachings of the apostles. So what we're going to find out is that really doesn't work either, because by driving people away, you're now sending them back to where they had come from, and they are talking about Jesus there. So that's another reason why it's possible that the people were just going to other places and not so much that they were scared, because if they had been scared of what happened to them in Jerusalem, they wouldn't be talking about Jesus when they got back home, for fear that the same thing would happen there. So you see all of this going on. Now, Philip, and I'm talking not about the Apostle Philip, but Philip, one of the 7 men chosen along with Stephen to hand out food to people. Uh, this Philip went to Samaria, and he is preaching there. And this was pretty cool because he has powers from God and is able to do healing and casting out demons and the sort of thing we've been hearing about before. Well, there's this guy there named Simon, the sorcerer, and he had some kind of powers. Some people think it was just something that would amaze people in what he could do. Others think, and I kind of lean this way, that he may have had the power to do some signs, but these were not signs from God. These were from the devil or from some other evil source. Anyway, this guy, Simon, had called himself the great power and uh, wanted people to follow him. And a lot of people did until they saw Philip. And then they realized, hey, Philip is the real deal. This guy can really do some amazing things. Well, it turned out that Simon believed too. And he, like many of these other people, was baptized and wanted to follow Jesus. Well, after some time, Peter and John came down from Jerusalem because they heard about what was going on. And when they were there, they were laying their hands on certain people and giving them the power to do things like healing and casting out demons, just like Philip had been doing. So here it appears that the ability to hand a power or to grant a power to another person, of course, it came from God, but it had to pass through one of the apostles first to get to that person. God wasn't just handing it out to anyone, and the people who had received it weren't able to pass it along to someone else, unless, of course, they were one of the apostles. Well, Simon, who had been the sorcerer, saw this, and he went to Peter and John and said, hey, I would like to have this same power that you're giving everybody else. And said, I've got a bunch of money I'll give to you for this. Peter looked at him and said, you can rot with your money. This is evil what you're intending to do. You cannot buy God's gifts. And a tragic end is going to come to you. Well, this scared Simon, and he begged Peter, please pray for me that these things will not happen to me. And I could go on and say some other things about Simon, but the Bible doesn't tell us anymore, and no one is really that sure about him. So we don't know if he did turn his life around when he realized that, oh, he was being selfish about all of this, or if he ended up just going bad. And we'll move on to the next part of this. But it's a great lesson for us. I will close with this part of it. It's a great lesson to us to realize that why do we want certain things from God? We need to ask ourselves first, why are we asking God for something? Is it just so that we can have something for ourselves, or is it something that we can do something for Him or do something He wants done? All right. Well, Philip has an angel show up and tell him, okay, head down to Gaza. Got a job for you. Well, he doesn't know what the job is, but he heads down to Gaza. Now, this is called Gaza in the desert because in those days there were a lot of towns that would have the same name. And for instance, there's in Athens, Alabama, Athens, Georgia, Athens, Tennessee, and they're all not a huge distance apart. And if you didn't say which one you were talking about, you could confuse somebody. Well, in this case, it's Gaza in the desert. And what we find is there's this city of Gaza, and it's kind of the last place where you can get water and get supplies before you cross the desert heading to Egypt. Well, Philip gets there, and then the Holy Spirit tells him, or points out to him a chariot has this man in it, and he says, that's the one. Well, Philip hears the man in it reading from the book of Isaiah. And I say hears him reading because it was more common in those days when someone read would be to read out loud. And this man was reading from the book of Isaiah. So Philip knows automatically, okay, this is someone who's following God. He knows the scriptures because at that time there were just the Old Testament scriptures. And Philip goes to him and says, do you understand what you're reading? And he finds out that this man is from Ethiopia. He is the queen's treasurer. So he's very important. And he works for a queen named Candace. And in looking at this, it's kind of interesting when you find that there are certain titles that go along with what started out as names. So with Herod, they had the first Herod, and then after him there were people who called themselves Herod, even though Herod was only the name of the first one. The other ones who came along, they just used the name Herod to mean that they were king of something. The same way with the Romans, they started off with one guy named Caesar, and then the ones who came after him called themselves Caesar. Well, it looks like that Candace was a name that was given to every queen in Ethiopia, at least for a certain amount of time. And during this time, he worked for this queen. Um, so he said, I don't understand this. I would need somebody to tell me what it means. Well, Philip can do that. He invites Philip into the chariot and they ride along. And Philip starts with that passage in Isaiah and is able to teach him about Jesus and what that the passage from Isaiah was about Jesus. And he told him a lot more things to the point that they came across a pool of water, which was kind of rare in that part of the world because, as I said, they were going into the desert. They found a pool of water, and the Ethiopian says, "Well, is there any reason I shouldn't be baptized?" And Philip says, "No, we can do this right away." Goes down, baptizes him. The Ethiopian returns to the chariot, heads to Ethiopia. Meanwhile, the Holy Spirit is telling Philip, "Got somewhere else for you to go." So they don't see each other again. And Philip is off someplace else, and he's not seen again until he appears in this one town. And that just about closes the story on Philip. But there's something else to think about right here. It kind of closes the story on the Ethiopian because he takes the word of Jesus back to Ethiopia. But it seems like, from what we find historically, that Christianity really didn't take hold for about 300 years. So we don't know if the Ethiopian went back and he just kind of set the groundwork so that they would be ready when someone came along 300 years later, or if God knew the heart of this man and focused on him alone and said, okay, he'll be the only one who really knows everything in Ethiopia, but it's worth it. So either way you look at it, it's a great story and kind of reminds us that we may have something in the big picture in which we're working for God and doing something, but we are important by ourselves. Even if it's just us, we are special to God. Okay, with that, I'm going to close today's lesson, and I will hope that you'll be with me next time. Oh, and one last thing in this today's tie, I have it with money, because money may be valuable in some cases, but it's really just nothing if we don't use it well. So, hope to see you next time. You have a good evening. Bye.